The evening had just started when the young waitress pushed open the back door of the small cafe and stepped into the warm smell of roasted beans and baked pastries. She tied her apron a little tighter, brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear, and took a slow breath to settle herself. It was the same routine every day, but today her mind drifted more than usual. She didn't show it on her face, but she carried a quiet heaviness she had grown used to hiding. Outside the windows, the sky was turning a soft orange, and the streetlights were beginning to glow. The cafe wasn't fancy, but it had its charm: warm lights, wooden chairs, a few framed photos on the walls, and soft music playing from a speaker in the corner. This was where locals gathered for their evening tea or coffee, and it was where she spent most of her evenings working quietly, unnoticed by most. She moved from table to table, taking orders with a gentle smile. She never said more than she needed to, but she always listened carefully, always spoke politely. People often assumed she was shy. Others thought she was simply trying to be invisible. But the truth was something deeper, something she never talked about. Not to the customers. Not to her coworkers. Not even to the friendly cafe owner who always watched out for her like a brother. She once had a dream. A loud, bright dream filled with music and applause. A dream that involved a piano, endless hours of practice, and the hope of performing on big stages. But life had a way of pulling dreams away from people. Years ago, something happened that made her step back from music, and she never touched a piano again after that. The keys she loved so much became a memory she avoided, like looking at an old photograph that hurt too much. But nobody in the cafe knew this. To them, she was simply the quiet girl who brought them their orders. That evening, a group of regular customers sat near the counter. They were loud but friendly in their own way, always joking around and laughing at almost everything. As she passed by with a tray of cups, soft piano music started playing through the cafe speakers. It was a beautiful, calm tune, something emotional yet peaceful. One of the customers raised his eyebrow and smirked. "Hey," he said loud enough for his friends to hear. "Think you could play like that?" His friends laughed. Not in a cruel way, but definitely not in a respectful one either. They looked her up and down the way people do when they assume they already know someone's limits. She paused for a moment, not because the question bothered her, but because it surprised her. She gave a small smile, the kind she used whenever she didn't know what else to say. "Oh no," she said softly. "I just serve tables." The group chuckled again, whispering little jokes to each other. She turned away before she could hear the details, even though she could guess what they were saying. She felt a tiny sting inside. Not enough to show, but enough to remind her why she kept her past hidden. The cafe owner looked up from behind the counter, noticing the exchange. His expression tightened for a moment, but he let it go. He had learned that she didn't like to be the center of attention, and he wasn't the type to push her. She went back to her work, placing plates, wiping tables, refilling cups. From the outside, nothing seemed different. But inside, the small moment with those customers tugged at an old memory she had buried deep. After her shift ended, she stood alone in the quiet cafe. The lights were dim now, and the owner was finishing up the register. She leaned against a table and let her eyes wander toward the speaker that had played the piano piece earlier. For a brief moment, she let herself imagine the feel of piano keys again. The coolness under her fingertips, the slight weight of each touch, the soft vibration of the instrument. The owner interrupted her thoughts as he came over with a warm smile. "Busy night," he said. She nodded. "Yes, a little more than usual." "You okay?" he asked gently. She forced a light smile. "Yes, just tired." He didn't push further. He just nodded and went back to counting receipts. But she could tell he noticed she was quieter than usual. When she finally stepped out into the evening air, she walked slowly toward the bus stop. The streets had calmed down, and the breeze felt cool against her face. Her mind replayed the moment from earlier, those customers laughing, the music in the background, the question that struck her more than she let on. "Do you think you could play like that?" The words echoed softly. She remembered how she used to answer that question proudly, confidently before life changed. She remembered the way her teacher once told her she had something special in the way she played. That she didn't just perform notes, she made people feel them. But those memories felt like they belonged to someone she no longer was. She reached the bus stop and sat on the bench. A few people waited there quietly, scrolling on their phones. She watched the headlights glow in the distance, thinking about how strange it was that people could make casual jokes without realizing they were touching someone's deepest wounds. Yet despite the sting of the moment, she didn't feel anger toward the customers. They didn't know her story. They didn't know what music meant to her. To them, she was simply a waitress in a small cafe, nothing more. As the bus approached, she took a slow breath. She told herself, like she always did, that tomorrow would be another day, another shift, another evening of keeping her past tucked away. But somewhere deep inside, something had shifted. Something small, something quiet, like a tiny spark trying to find its way out. She didn't know it yet, but the moment those customers snickered at her was going to lead her back to the place she had been avoiding for years. Life had a way of nudging people, even with moments that seemed unimportant at the time. And soon, without planning it, she was going to touch a piano again. Not because someone mocked her. Not because she wanted to prove anything. But because her heart had been waiting, silently, patiently, for the chance to play once more. The next few days at the cafe felt ordinary on the surface, but something quiet lingered in the air. The waitress showed up on time, tied her apron, greeted customers, and moved through her usual routine. But inside her mind, a thought kept replaying. Those small laughs from the regulars, the question they tossed at her without thinking, and the way the piano music had stirred memories she had tried to forget. On a warm afternoon near the end of the week, the cafe felt busier than usual. People came in and out, conversations filled the room, and the sound of cups clinking against saucers echoed softly. The owner seemed excited about something, though he hadn't said what. She noticed him going back and forth between the front door and the corner of the cafe near the window. When she finally had a moment to pause, she saw it. A wooden upright piano being pushed inside by two delivery workers. The piano looked aged but cared for, its dark brown surface reflecting the warm lights of the cafe. The owner walked behind it with a smile that seemed almost proud. She froze in place. Piano. Not just a small keyboard or a decorative piece. A real piano. Her legs felt unsure for a moment as she watched the workers set it in place. Customers nearby looked surprised, some even clapping out of curiosity. A few joked about the cafe becoming a music lounge now. But she stood quietly, her heart beating faster than she wanted. The owner approached her with a gentle smile. "What do you think?" he asked. She took a moment before answering. "It's unexpected," she said carefully. "I've been wanting to bring one in for months. Thought it might add some charm. Maybe even attract more customers on weekends," he explained. She nodded, trying to keep her expression even. She didn't want to show how much the sight of the piano shook her. But the moment didn't end there. The regular customers from earlier in the week had just walked in. They noticed the piano almost instantly. "Whoa, look at that," one of them said. "We getting a show now?" Another teased. "Hey, maybe she can play it for us." He pointed in her direction. The group snickered again, not realizing their voices carried across the room. Some customers nearby looked over, curious about the exchange. The owner's expression tightened for a second, but then he stepped forward. "Actually," he said, "she can play. And she's very good." His tone wasn't loud, but it held a kind of quiet confidence. She turned to him quickly, eyes wide. "I know that was a long time ago," she whispered, but the owner shook his head. "I remember hearing you once. It was at that community event a few years back. You played beautifully." Her face warmed with embarrassment and something else. Fear mixed with longing. She didn't expect anyone to remember that day. She had almost convinced herself it didn't matter anymore. The regulars raised their eyebrows. "Seriously?" one of them asked. You play piano?" There it was again, that tone. Not hateful but doubtful, as if the idea of a simple waitress having talent didn't fit their picture. She didn't respond. She couldn't. Her throat felt tight. The owner placed a kind hand on her shoulder. "Why don't you try a small piece tonight? Just a few minutes. No pressure." Her heart raced. She didn't want to disappoint him, but she also didn't want to face those memories. She lived quietly for a reason. "I don't know," she said softly. "No one here expects perfection," the owner replied. "Just honesty." The word hit her harder than she expected. Honesty. Later that evening, when the rush slowed down, she found herself wiping a table close to the piano. Her hands kept drifting toward it, stopping just before touching the wooden surface. She felt nervous and almost shy around it, like seeing an old friend she had lost touch with. A few customers noticed her lingering there. Whispering began to spread. "Is she going to play?" Maybe the owner talked her into it. "I didn't expect that from her." The regulars who had teased her earlier sat quietly this time. Their expressions held a mix of curiosity and something like guilt. Her breathing grew uneven. She wasn't sure she wanted to play after all. It had been so long. What if she had lost her touch? What if she froze? What if she embarrassed herself in front of everyone? The owner approached again, but this time he didn't push. He simply stood next to her and said softly, "You don't have to prove anything to them, or to me, but if your heart wants to try, even a little, I think you should." She swallowed slowly. Her eyes drifted to the piano bench, then to the keys hidden under the closed lid. Finally, almost without realizing she was doing it, she sat down on the bench. Her hands rested on her lap. She stayed still for a moment, breathing deeply, trying to calm the wave of emotions rolling through her. Customers turned their heads. The room grew quieter. Even those who didn't know what was happening sensed something unusual. Her fingers gently lifted the lid. The white and black keys looked almost the same as she remembered. Simple, familiar, yet touching them felt like touching a memory that had been sleeping for years. She placed her fingertips lightly on the keys but didn't press down yet. She just let them rest there, feeling the smooth surface. "Take your time," the owner said softly. She nodded. The first sound she made was a single note, a gentle, hesitant tone that echoed like a question. She paused again. Then she played another note, then another, letting her fingers slowly remember the way. It wasn't a song yet. It was just her waking up old memories. But even those few notes changed the room. The customers went silent. The kitchen staff peeked from behind the counter. The owner quietly stepped back, giving her space. She felt her chest tighten as she tried to remember a piece she used to love. It came to her slowly, like a memory walking through fog. She played the opening notes, simple, soft, trembling. Her fingers moved carefully, almost unsure, but the melody began to take shape. Each sound pulled another memory from her heart, late-night practices, her old instructor's encouraging smile, the joy she felt when a piece finally made sense. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the music lead her. When she opened them again, she saw the room had changed. People sat quietly, leaning forward, listening. The regular customers who had laughed earlier no longer had smiles on their faces. Their expressions softened into something else, surprise mixed with respect. It wasn't a full performance. It wasn't perfect. She only played a short part of the song before stopping suddenly, her breath shaky. But it was enough. When she lifted her hands from the keys, the room remained silent for a second, almost as if no one wanted to break the moment. Then, softly at first, people began to clap. Not loud, not overwhelming, but sincere. She looked down at her hands, surprised at what she had done. She wasn't proud yet. She wasn't confident. But she felt something warm rise inside her. A feeling she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. The owner smiled warmly from behind the counter. One of the regulars cleared his throat and said, "I didn't expect that." Another lifted his cup awkwardly, avoiding her eyes. She stood up slowly from the bench, unsure what to say or where to look. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to process the moment. She hadn't meant to play. She hadn't meant to open that door again. But she had. And though it scared her, something inside her whispered that this moment was only the beginning of what was coming next. The following evening, the cafe felt different the moment she walked in. She couldn't explain why, but the air carried a gentle buzz, like people were expecting something to happen. She tied her apron as usual, but her hands moved slowly, still remembering the feeling of the piano keys from the night before. She hadn't planned to play again. In fact, when she woke up that morning, she tried to convince herself that what happened last night was a one-time thing. A moment of weakness, or maybe courage, she wasn't sure. But now, as she looked around the cafe, she noticed more eyes on her than usual. Not in a heavy or uncomfortable way, but with a kind of curiosity she wasn't used to. The piano sat quietly in the corner, its polished wooden surface reflecting the warm lights hanging above. It looked peaceful, almost inviting. She avoided looking at it too long, afraid that she might feel something she wasn't ready to handle. She went back to work, delivering cups of tea, wiping tables and greeting customers. But every now and then, someone would glance toward the piano as if silently wondering whether she would go near it again. By the time the sun dipped low and the cafe lights grew softer, a calm evening crowd settled in. Some people chatted quietly, others worked on laptops, and a few simply sat and enjoyed the atmosphere. Among them were the regular customers who had teased her earlier that week. Tonight, however, their humor was toned down, as if they were unsure of how to behave after what they witnessed. Eventually, the cafe owner walked over and said, "If you want to play again later, you can, but only if you feel like it." His tone was gentle, not pushing, simply offering. She nodded, though she didn't answer. She appreciated that he didn't pressure her, but his words stirred something inside her. A part of her wanted to play again, not for the crowd, not for attention, but for herself. She hadn't felt that desire in years, and it frightened her a little. A few hours passed. The evening slowly deepened. The cafe filled with a mix of soft conversations and background music playing from the speakers. Everything felt calm. Too calm, almost. Then it happened. A soft power flicker caused the speakers to go silent for a moment. The music stopped mid-note, and for the first time all day, the cafe sat in complete quiet. Someone jokingly said, "Guess we need live music now." Another added, "Yeah, let her play. She was amazing yesterday." Their voices were not mocking this time. Instead, there was a genuine warmth in them. She felt her heart skip. The piano in the corner seemed to grow heavier in her vision, as if calling out to her again. She wiped her hands nervously on her apron. The owner watched her with a patient smile. "Only if you want to," he reminded her once more. For a moment, she stood completely still. She looked around at the faces waiting. Not demanding, not forcing, just quietly hopeful. Then she took a slow breath and walked toward the piano. The room softened. People leaned back in their seats, conversations lowered to whispers, and the energy shifted into something warm and expectant. She sat down on the wooden bench, feeling the familiar creak beneath her. Her fingers hovered above the keys for a moment before gently settling down. The keys felt cold at first, but comforting, like touching something she had once loved deeply but lost along the way. She took one more breath and began to play. This time, she didn't start with hesitant notes. She chose a piece she used to play when she was younger, one that carried emotion but didn't demand perfection. A soft, flowing melody filled the cafe, gentle like a quiet story unfolding. Her fingers moved slowly, gracefully, gaining confidence with each passing second. The music wrapped around the room, warm and sincere, touching every corner. The customers fell silent. Some closed their eyes. Others simply watched her in awe. Even the regulars who had once laughed at her looked spellbound, no longer whispering jokes or exchanging smug glances. As the melody grew deeper, her memories returned. Not painful ones this time, but warm ones. She remembered sitting in a small practice room years ago, working on this very piece. She remembered the joy she felt when she finally mastered a difficult part, and how her teacher had smiled at her with genuine pride. A soft smile formed on her lips without her noticing. When she reached the middle of the piece, something shifted inside her. She wasn't just playing. She was feeling the music again. Each note carried emotion she had hidden for so long. Hope, sadness, longing, peace. The cafe seemed to breathe with her. A young couple held hands under their table as they listened. A man sitting alone closed his eyes, letting the melody wash over him. Even the kitchen staff leaned against the doorway, forgetting their tasks for a moment. The owner watched her carefully, as if he knew this night meant something deeper than anyone else realized. She played the final notes softly, letting them fade like a whispered goodbye. When she lifted her hands from the keys, the silence that followed was full, not empty. It held emotion, surprise, admiration. Then the applause came. It wasn't loud or wild. It was steady, warm, sincere, like a soft embrace from everyone in the room. She blinked in surprise, her cheeks warming with a mixture of embarrassment and happiness. She stood slowly from the bench, unsure what to do with so many eyes on her. Someone near the back called out, "That was beautiful." Another person said, "You have a gift." She lowered her gaze, smiling shyly. She had never liked the spotlight, but tonight, the attention didn't feel heavy. It felt healing. One of the regular customers, the one who had teased her the most, walked up afterward, scratching the back of his head awkwardly. "Hey," he said softly. I was wrong about you. You're really talented. I shouldn't have joked the way I did." She looked up at him, surprised by his sincerity. "It's okay," she said gently. "You didn't know." He nodded, still looking apologetic. "But still, I'm sorry." His apology touched her more than she expected. People rarely admitted their mistakes so openly. After that, customers slowly returned to their conversations, though the mood remained peaceful and warm. Many glanced her way with soft smiles. Some approached the owner asking if she would play again in the future. She returned to her usual duties, but she did so with a lighter heart. Every now and then, she would glance at the piano, feeling a warmth in her chest she hadn't felt in years. Later that night, after the cafe closed and the lights dimmed, she sat at the piano once more, alone this time. She didn't play anything big, just a few quiet notes, letting the sound fill the empty room. It felt like the beginning of something she had long denied herself. She stayed there for a few minutes, letting the peace settle inside her, before standing up to leave. As she reached the door, the owner said, "You know, you don't have to hide your talent anymore." She looked at him, surprised. "I wasn't hiding. I just moved away from it." He smiled knowingly. "Maybe it's time to move back." She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, feeling a new sense of hope, small but real. "Maybe," she whispered, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't walk out of the cafe feeling like someone carrying an invisible weight. Instead, she stepped into the cool night air with a small, growing light inside her. A light she didn't know was still alive. A light that was just beginning to shine again. The next few days moved in a way she did not expect. It was as if her quiet performance had left a soft mark on everyone who had heard it. People entered the cafe with a different kind of energy. Some even looked towards the piano before they looked at the menu. Others smiled at her in a way that felt warmer, almost as if her music had made her more visible. She didn't quite know how to feel about this new attention. It wasn't overwhelming, but it was gentle and steady. She wasn't used to people seeing her beyond her apron and small smile. She wasn't used to the idea that something she did, something she thought she had left behind, could mean something to others. Every time she walked past the piano, she felt a strange tug inside her. It wasn't fear. It wasn't pressure. It was something softer, something like a quiet invitation. Still, she wasn't sure she wanted to play again in front of people just yet. The owner didn't push her. He never did. But she could tell he was happy. He cleaned the piano more often now, dusting its surface with a care that made her smile. "People are talking about you," he said one afternoon while rearranging pastries in the display. She paused mid-step. "Talking about me?" "Yes, they keep asking if you'll play again on the weekend." He chuckled softly. "I told them I couldn't promise anything. You know I won't force you." Her heart squeezed gently. The idea of disappointing people made her uneasy, but the idea of performing again made her nervous. "Maybe later," she murmured. The owner nodded, respecting her pace. As evening settled in, the cafe grew busy. Conversations layered over each other, cups clinked, and people filled the warm space like usual. But somewhere in the middle of the noise, a soft voice pierced through. "Excuse me." She looked up from wiping a table to see a middle-aged woman standing near her. She had gentle eyes and a kind expression. "I don't want to bother you," the woman said. "But were you the one who played the piano the other night?" She felt her cheeks heat slightly. "Yes, that was me." The woman smiled softly. "I just wanted to thank you. Your playing reminded me of someone I lost. It brought back memories I hadn't felt in years." Her voice softened even more. It was healing. The waitress blinked slowly, caught off guard by the sincerity. She didn't know what to say. Her heart felt warm and heavy at the same time. "I'm glad it meant something to you," she said quietly. The woman nodded, gave a small smile, and returned to her seat. After she walked away, the waitress stood still for a moment. Hearing that her music brought comfort to someone else touched her deeply. She hadn't expected her old dream, something she thought belonged to the past, to still have the power to reach people. Later that night, the regular group who had teased her before walked in again. This time they seemed unsure. They sat down quietly instead of cracking jokes like usual. One of them eventually stood up and approached the counter where she was arranging cups. "Hey," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look, I know we laughed before, and I know it wasn't right." He paused, looking genuinely uncomfortable. "You're playing, it's something else. I mean that. I'm sorry for making fun." She studied him for a moment. His expression wasn't forced. It wasn't fake. It was earnest. She offered a small smile. "Thank you for saying that. It's okay." He nodded, still awkward but relieved. When he returned to his friends, they whispered about the apology, nudging each other like people unsure how to behave in a moment of honesty. Hours passed. The cafe slowly emptied. The lights dimmed to a softer glow. And while she cleaned tables and refilled napkin holders, she kept thinking about the woman's words, the apology from the regular customer, and the gentle claps from the night before. She didn't realize she was drifting toward the piano again until she found herself standing right beside it. She reached out and ran a finger lightly along the smooth edge. "You're thinking about playing," the owner said from behind her. She turned around, startled she hadn't heard him walk up. "I'm thinking," she admitted. He smiled. "Thinking is a good start." She sat down on the bench, but she didn't open the lid yet. She simply rested her hands on her lap. "I used to play for hours every day," she said quietly, surprising herself with the confession. "I thought I'd become a pianist one day, but life changed, and I stopped." The owner nodded, listening with patience. She continued, her voice softer. "I didn't think I'd ever touch a piano again. I thought it didn't matter anymore. But when I played here, I felt something again. Something I forgot I could feel." The owner's eyes warmed. Some dreams never really disappear. They just wait for the right moment to return. She looked down at the keys. "But I'm scared." "Of the piano?" he asked. She shook her head. "No. Of opening a part of myself I closed for so long." The owner rested a gentle hand on the top of the piano. "Sometimes, the things we fear the most are the things we needed all along." She let his words sink in. Slowly, she lifted the lid. The keys reflected the soft lighting of the cafe. She pressed one gently, letting the single note ring out. Felt familiar, comforting, like a soft whisper telling her she wasn't alone. She looked back at the owner. "Maybe I could play again on the weekend. Not a big thing. Just a few pieces." His eyes brightened. "Only if you want to." "I think I do," she said, still unsure but hopeful. The owner didn't celebrate loudly. He simply nodded with a warm, encouraging smile. "Then we'll let people know there might be a little music this weekend. Just maybe." She gave a small laugh. Just maybe. That weekend arrived faster than she expected. The cafe filled early. People came in pairs, families, and even several customers she didn't recognize. The room hummed with gentle excitement. She stayed mostly behind the counter at first, busying herself with anything she could find. She was nervous, even more than before. Her hands trembled slightly. Her breath felt tight. The owner noticed. "You don't have to play until you're ready," he said softly. She nodded. "I know." But the truth was, she wanted to. Her heart wanted to. She just needed a moment to gather herself. When she finally stepped toward the piano, the room shifted again. Conversations slowed. Faces turned. But it wasn't the sharp attention she feared. It was welcoming. She sat at the bench, closed her eyes for a moment, and breathed. She began to play. This wasn't like the night before. She chose a piece that meant something deep to her. A melody she used to play when life felt heavy. A piece that reminded her of strength hidden beneath softness. Her fingers moved with more confidence this time. The music flowed like warm water, steady and calm. The cafe filled with a soothing lightness, as if every note carried a piece of her heart. People felt it. They didn't just hear her. They felt her. A young woman in the corner wiped her eyes quietly. A man sitting alone leaned forward, resting his chin on his hand, his face full of emotion. Even the regulars who once mocked her seemed deeply moved, their usual talk replaced with quiet awe. She lost herself in the music. Every note released something she had held inside for too long. It wasn't about proving anything. It wasn't about performing. It was about healing. When the final notes faded, the room stayed silent for a heartbeat, as if everyone needed a moment to return to themselves. Then applause filled the cafe. Warm, loud, honest. She looked up, her eyes shining slightly, surprised at the depth of their reaction. She stood slowly, taking in the smiles around her. She didn't feel overwhelmed this time. She felt understood. As she walked away from the piano, a realization formed gently inside her. Her music wasn't just stirring the spirits of others. It was waking something inside her, too. The news about her playing spread in ways she never imagined. It didn't happen all at once. It started slowly, like a gentle wave that keeps growing without making noise. One person told a friend, that friend told someone else, and soon people who had never even been to the cafe came because they wanted to hear the girl who surprised everyone with a single song. She didn't fully understand how much things had changed. She still moved through her shifts the same way she always did, quiet, focused, polite. She still served drinks, wiped tables, and handled the cash register. Nothing on the outside looked different. But the way people looked at her now was not the same as before. Their eyes held interest, respect, and sometimes even admiration. On Friday evenings, the cafe owner encouraged her to sit by the piano for a little while. At first, she felt shy about it. She worried that maybe people would expect too much. She feared that if she made one mistake, the magic would disappear. But the owner always gave her a warm, reassuring smile. He reminded her that no one came to hear perfection. They came to feel something. So she agreed. Not because she wanted attention, but because she realized how much she missed touching the keys. It felt like reconnecting with an old friend she lost over the years. A friend she thought she would never see again. On the first official evening she played again, the cafe filled earlier than usual. People gathered near the piano, though not too close. They didn't want to make her uncomfortable. Some ordered tea or coffee and then sat quietly, waiting. A soft excitement blended with the warm smell of pastries. When she finally sat down at the piano, she took a deep breath and let her fingers rest on the keys. For a moment, she felt the familiar fear rise inside her. But then she remembered the moment everything changed the first time. She remembered how the room fell silent. How the customers who mocked her ended up captivated. How she felt something inside her come alive after being hidden for so long. With that thought, she began to play. The first notes flowed like a soft breeze. Her hands moved slowly, carefully, letting the melody build on its own. The people around her leaned slightly forward, trying to catch every sound. The cafe, usually loud with chatter, grew peaceful. Even the owner stood near the counter, watching with a proud smile. Halfway through the piece, she forgot she was in front of an audience. She wasn't thinking about technique or trying to impress anyone. She simply played from a place deep inside, where her memories, hopes, and fears lived. The room seemed to breathe with her music. When she finished, there was a pause. A brief, gentle moment where no one spoke, as if they were still inside the melody. Then the applause came. Warm, genuine, and filled with appreciation. She lowered her eyes, shy as always, but her smile was real. It came from a place of quiet confidence she never thought she would feel again. After that night, she began playing every weekend. Not long sessions, just enough to remind people why they kept coming back. Every time she played, more new faces appeared. Some brought their children, wanting them to experience something simple but meaningful. Others came after difficult days, hoping the music would soothe them. She became a gentle part of the cafe's identity. People didn't refer to her with fancy titles. They simply said, "The girl who plays the piano," but they said it with warmth. One evening, the group of customers who once mocked her returned. She noticed them as soon as they walked in. For a moment, old nerves tingled in her chest. But then she saw something different in their expressions. They weren't smirking. They weren't whispering. They looked a little nervous themselves. After ordering their drinks, one of them approached her at the counter. He cleared his throat before speaking, clearly uncomfortable. "We just wanted to say, we were wrong that day," he said quietly. "We shouldn't have acted the way we did. Your music, it was something else. We're sorry." She didn't hold grudges. She never had. So she offered a small smile and nodded. "Thank you," she replied softly. "That means a lot." The man nodded back, relieved. Later that night, she played again. When she glanced toward the group, they were watching her with calm, almost thoughtful expressions. Not mocking, not doubtful, just listening. The cafe owner watched all this unfold and felt a quiet pride. Not only because her talent brought more people into the cafe, but because she herself had changed. She stood straighter now. She spoke with a little more confidence. And when she played, she didn't try to hide. She let herself be seen. One day, after closing time, the owner sat down with her at one of the tables. The lights were dim, and the piano sat peacefully in the corner. "You know," he said gently, "you've given something to this place that we never had before." She blinked in surprise. "Me? Yes," he said with a warm smile. "Your music brings people together. It gives them comfort. It reminds them they still have feelings they forget to slow down and notice. Not many people can do that." She lowered her eyes, touched by his words. "I didn't think anyone would care," she admitted quietly. "People care more than you think," he said. "Sometimes they just need someone brave enough to go first." That night, after locking up, she sat at the piano again. Not to practice, not to perform, but just to play a soft tune for herself. The place was empty, and her music echoed gently against the walls. She felt something warm inside her, something steady and peaceful. It took her years to find her way back to the piano. Years to rebuild confidence she once lost. Years to understand that her gift didn't disappear, even when she stopped believing in it. The people who laughed at her once learned something too. They realized that you can't judge someone just because they seem quiet or because their job doesn't show their talent. Everyone carries stories, skills, and dreams hidden beneath the surface. Her journey didn't make headlines. It wasn't dramatic or loud. It was simple and pure, rooted in courage, kindness, and rediscovery. And so, the girl who once feared touching the piano keys found her voice again. Not through words, but through melodies that touched the hearts of strangers. Her music didn't just stir their spirits. It helped her reconnect with her own.